The South China Sea is one of the most contested and strategically vital regions on the planet. Stretching over 1.4 million square miles, this maritime expanse is not just a hub for global trade. It's a powder keg of territorial disputes, military posturing, and great power rivalry. With trillions of dollars in shipping routes, vast oil and gas reserves, and the interests of multiple nations colliding, the area has become a geopolitical flashpoint that could drag the world into conflict. But how did this body of water, once a relatively quiet fishing ground, turn into a potential trigger for war? The answer lies in a mix of historical grievances, economic ambitions, and the relentless power struggle between the United States and China. A sea of competing claims. At the heart of the South China Sea dispute are overlapping territorial claims by 6 governments: China, Taiwan, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei. Each has its own historical and legal arguments, but China's assertion is by far the most expansive. Beijing claims almost the entire sea under its so-called 9-dash line, a vague, U-shaped demarcation that was first drawn in the 1940s and later expanded. The problem? An international tribunal at The Hague ruled in 2016 that China's claims have no legal basis. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. But Beijing dismissed the ruling, doubling down on its militarization of the region instead. The rush for resources beyond sovereignty, the South China Sea is about money and energy. The U.S. Energy Information Administration estimates that the region holds 11 billion barrels of oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, enough to fuel economies for decades. For energy-hungry nations like China, Vietnam, and the Philippines, controlling these resources is a matter of national security. But it's not just about oil and gas. The South China Sea is also one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, with over $3 trillion in trade passing through annually. Whoever dominates these waters can choke off supply chains, cripple rival economies, or secure their own trade routes in times of crisis. Borders. China's aggressive buildup. In recent years, Beijing has taken an increasingly assertive stance, turning disputed reefs and atolls into militarized artificial islands. Satellite images reveal Chinese outposts equipped with runways, missile systems, radar stations, and even potential nuclear storage facilities. This strategy, known as salami slicing, involves gradual encroachment, testing how far China can push without triggering a full-scale war. The Philippines, Vietnam, and others have protested, but China's Coast Guard and maritime militia, fishing boats that act as paramilitary forces, routinely harass foreign vessels, block access to fishing grounds, and even ram ships to enforce Beijing's claims. America's role: freedom of navigation versus containment. The U.S. has no territorial claims in the South China Sea, but it has a vested interest in keeping the region open. Washington conducts freedom of navigation operations, FONOPs, sending warships near Chinese-controlled islands to challenge excessive maritime claims. The message: the U.S. Navy won't let Beijing turn the South China Sea into its private lake. But to China, these patrols are provocations. Beijing sees U.S. involvement as part of a broader strategy to contain its rise, and tensions have escalated dangerously close to conflict. In 2018, a near collision between a Chinese destroyer and a U.S. Navy ship raised fears of accidental war. Meanwhile, Washington has strengthened military ties with regional allies like the Philippines, Japan, and Australia, further fueling Beijing's paranoia. Prakasitskaken. ASEAN's divided response. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, has struggled to present a united front. Some members, like Vietnam and the Philippines, push for a tougher stance against China. Others, like Cambodia and Laos, are more sympathetic to Beijing due to economic reliance on Chinese investment. This division plays into China's hands. By keeping ASEAN fragmented, Beijing can deal with each country individually, offering economic incentives or applying pressure as needed. The risk of escalation. With so much at stake, the risk of miscalculation is high. A clash between Chinese and Philippine forces, an accidental shoot-down of a surveillance plane, or an oil rig confrontation could spiral into a larger conflict, And if the US gets drawn in, the world could see a US-China military showdown, something both sides want to avoid but may not be able to control. Is there a way out? Able to control. Is there a way out? Diplomatic solutions exist, but they're difficult. A binding code of conduct between China and ASEAN has been discussed for years, but Beijing prefers vague agreements that allow it to keep expanding its influence. Meanwhile, smaller nations are caught in the middle, forced to balance between standing up to China and avoiding economic retaliation. For now, the South China Sea remains a slow-burning crisis, where every move is calculated, every provocation measured. But as military deployments increase and nationalistic rhetoric hardens, the world may be sleepwalking toward a conflict nobody wants, but one that could explode at any moment. The question isn't just who owns the South China Sea, it's whether the world can prevent it from becoming the next great battleground.